it's working for songwriters and composers, I think. I'm very passionate about music, always been very passionate about music, and I think being able to work for musicians and be a part of the creative process is a wonderful privilege, and I am very thankful for it every day. I've always been incredibly passionate's the sort of cliche word, obsessed with music, really. I mean, I grew up in that time when music was by far the biggest cultural influence, and it's kind of remained that way for me throughout my life. You've got to have an open mind about the project. You can't begin the project or go through the project with a closed view of what's to happen. So you've got to have an open mind, but paradoxically, you've got to be prepared to make hard decisions. You've got to be prepared to be decisive and go down one path when there might be a number of viable and arguable alternatives. And I think you've also got to, on the one hand, you've got to be democratic and consultative, but again, you've got to be prepared to make the decision, sometimes against advice. Luck, really. I just applied for the job of legal officer at APRA when they first established that job in the late 1970s, and I was fresh out of law school. So I tend to believe in what Woody Allen says about life. 90% of life is turning up, really. Or put another way, being in the right place at the right time. So luck was a big part in it for me, but I also, as I said earlier, I was always completely obsessed and passionate about music. So to the extent that I have any belief in fate, I always felt that I was going to do something in music, and being non-musical, this is the next best thing, I think. I'm a very keen swimmer. I do a lot of swimming, ocean swimming. I'm a keen tennis player, and obviously music is a big thing for me, and because I have a small child, television is a big thing for me. We tend to stay home a lot, and I do think I read a great article somewhere about television having usurped feature film as the great audiovisual art form at the moment, and I think that's right. I mean, I'm fond of saying that for me, a single episode of The Sopranos, pick any episode of The Sopranos, or pick any episode of Nurse Jackie, or Mad Men, or Boardwalk Empire, or any of those great contemporary series, is better than 95% of feature films, I think. So I love television, but I also love film. Lots of topics get me on a soapbox, but I think relevantly, probably the issue of freedom of content on the internet, i.e. online piracy, I think is an issue that gets me worked up a bit, because I think the moral proposition is, from my perspective, is a very simple one, and that is, should the author or the person who creates the music receive some reward when it's consumed by people, regardless of how it's consumed, if the author wants reward? And I think the answer to that is yes. We all want some reward or recognition. We're all entitled to a reward for what we're able to produce intellectually. I think the argument has not been assisted by a number of stakeholders who ought to have known better. I think the legal academic world has not played a terribly constructive role. I think academia generally has not played a constructive role when it comes to regulation of the internet. And I think the people who've profited most from the pillaging of artists and authors' livelihoods in the last 15 years, namely the telephone companies and the internet service providers, need to begin to take some responsibility in relation to that issue. So there you go, there's the soapbox. I think that in my area that is looking after songwriters and composers, to imagine starting with a blank piece of paper and produce something that moves, that is capable of moving people emotionally to such an extraordinary degree as music is. I mean, nothing, in my experience, in my life, nothing alters your emotional, your feelings or your emotions as much as music. Music can instantly transport you to another time, another place, another part of your life. It can change your mood from dark to happy and vice versa, happy to sad, all of those things. So to create that, in sitting in front of a blank computer screen or a blank piece of paper, it's just astonishing. So I'm in awe of them.